to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
Well, welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show. My name is Tom Dutta. I am the Quiet Warrior. I'm excited to have on my show today Jade McAuliffe. Hey, Jade, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. We were just talking offline, and I want to let the audience know you're down in Wisconsin, and I'm up in the west coast of Canada in British Columbia. So it's just awesome to have you on. I want to say up front before I turn it to you that I was inspired by you. I recently reached out to you because I had read a book you wrote, and it got my heart. And I said, you know what? I think this is a story that needs to be told and heard. And so here we are. So let's have some fun with this. First of all, this is about you. So just tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, I call myself the Midwestern version girl next door. I am very much a regular person. I'm a mother of 4. I've been a single mother for most of my parenting career. I love my kids more than life itself, and believe that they have been my greatest teachers and biggest inspirers to do my work, my internal work that I've, needed to do to heal and recover and try to, make something beautiful out of a mess, basically.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, we could do a whole show on being a single mom of 4. That's pretty amazing. And right there, as my mind goes on a journey, I was raised by a mom and I had 2 brothers. And well, she was a single mom because, many people know my story. When I was younger, my parents split, my dad left. And so I totally understand the journey. But wow, let's get you back to do a show on that one. I want to build you up a bit. I like to say that people coming to the show are authentic. You certainly are. I love you and your story. But I want to tell people a little bit more about the greatness behind you. I'm going to read the first part of your bio. It says, it took 3 family tragedies for Jade to awaken from decades of darkness and self-sabotage. The agony of losing her last living sister to suicide. The summer of 2015 left only enough energy to deal with her grief. She knew then she must face the pain of her past or risk losing herself for good. I mean, that set me on a journey, and I started learning more about your body of work. I mean, you were a blogger. You started blogging about your experiences. And then in 2017, you turned that into a website. You now do coaching, life coaching, just to help others who are on the same journey. I'm really inspired, Jade, by also the community work you do. Notably, in 2016, you joined the Walworth County Suicide Prevention Education and Awareness Coalition. You've done more things. Co-chaired the Out of Darkness Community Walk for Suicide Awareness and Prevention. And you volunteer for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention's Healing Conversations program. You might talk about that, I'm sure, but it's pretty amazing stuff, and we need more of you out there. And I know you'll talk about this later in this story, and we'll give you a chance to plug it at the end. And that is, you've authored this incredible book. I want to tell people that I picked it up. I couldn't put it down. It's called Wake Me from the Nightmare, Hope, Healing, and Empowerment After Suicide Loss. And so there we are. So you know what? This is all about the hero's journey. I like to say that we learn, Jade, from people like you. And it's not just the greatness and successes in life, but the backstory. I think you used the word the mess. And so we want to learn from your story. Why don't you take us back to where it began and get us into that story?
Okay. Well, it's a very long and complicated story. But the short version is, I would say by the time I was about 8 years old, I was probably clinically depressed. Mm-hmm. If I would have had if I would have seen a psychiatrist at the time, I'm pretty sure that's what they would have said. By the time I was about 4, I was the youngest of 3 other siblings. And there were 6 years between my brother and me. And we came from a very dark and very abusive family system. But it was all very covert. And from the outside looking in, everybody thought everything was fine. I came from an affluent family. We lived in a nice neighborhood. My dad was a physician who was well known throughout the community, and nobody had any idea the kind of nightmare we were living in that house. And it was I can't even say all of it, but all of it was done behind closed doors, but the worst of it happened at night. And without getting into details, basically what happened when I turned 4 was my brother kind of started acting out what was happening to him on me. So I kind of became his punching bag. In his kind of release and his way of acting out what was happening. And, I haven't spoken to my brother in, I don't know, probably 16 years. But the thing is, I don't hate my brother, and I don't even hate I don't hate my family. But, I wish he would have chose differently. I wish I wouldn't have been the outlet for his pain. But I was. And so I pretty much lived in fear all the time because I never knew when he was going to be nice to me and when he was going to flip and, kind of start. He was very physically abusive.
Yeah.
So, and honestly, my dad was merciless with him. So I understand where it comes from. But we all have choices. And what it amounts to is my sisters were my protectors. They were the ones that got him off of me. They were the ones that kept him away from me when they could. But because there were so many years between us, my oldest sister was 9 years older. My next oldest sister was 8 years older, and my brother was 6 years older. So by the time, they left and it was just us, or if they were out and I was alone with him, it wasn't good. It just wasn't good. So yeah, I'm pretty sure by the time I remember by the time I was 5, I had a suitcase packed with all of my favorite things. And I remember standing at the edge of my backyard going, where am I going to go?
Wow.
I have no place to go. And you know what? It was like somebody knocked the wind out of me. The thought of freedom made me so happy and made me feel like, oh my God, there's another life out there for me. Even at 5, and yeah, it's so funny when I even think of what I packed in that suitcase. But when I realized there was no place to go, all the wind left my sails, and I was, oh my God, I'm stuck here. So yeah. So, you can imagine year after year after year after year, how trauma accumulates. And of course, the rules in our house were don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. None of what happens in this house leaves this house. And I was the emotional big mouth of the family. I was the one who was constantly pointing out inaccuracies in stories and, hey, how come this is happening? And, I didn't want my brother to come in the bathroom and I was in there. All of this was ignored. All of it was ignored. Like they wouldn't let me put a lock on my door. I remember sometimes wedging a chair on the door at night, but there was no protection, none whatsoever.
Wow.
Except my sisters.
Yeah, it sounds like you had an amazing tribe of siblings, the sisters. Why don't you take a breath, catch your breath there, and I'm just going to jump in. Gosh, I want to tell you, like that movie, The Grinch Who Stole Christmas, and when the heart grew 3 times. I'm listening to your story. I read your book, and my heart was growing. It's growing more on the phone. I can feel your courage. I can feel your pain. I can feel your joy about the fact that you've survived, and you're now a healer to help other people. I love this story, and I got to tell you that, as my mind's going in a journey in different directions, one of the things I thought about was something Brene Brown, who's an expert in the area of shame and vulnerability, and she said, when you have a story, you need to tell your story, but you don't tell it to everyone. You tell it to the tribe that is worthy of hearing that story. And then when you tell your story, you can write the next chapter your way. And I'm just so honored that you're telling your story. I mean, just to what I heard, I mean, I just can't even fathom that at age 5, you're standing on the edge of nowhere with a suitcase packed. I mean, I'd like to know what was in that. And then, here you were with a sibling. Unfortunately, you were at the end of what you called covert behaviors that were very hurtful, that we probably can't even imagine the details behind that. I mean, they say that what I learned from my own journey in my childhood is that, we have people in our lives, parents and siblings, family, and they're the nurturers. And when you grow up without that nurturing from people who had the responsibility, it puts a hole in the soul. I'm just so amazed that at age 5, there you were. And I think that you're an amazing person because you had a gift. Obviously, in my mind, God put you in a situation and is using you, is working through you. You had a gift. I mean, at age 5, to be resilient enough to be able to stand up, to be the, as you call it, the big mouth, questioning the don't talk, don't trust, don't feel, to be able to keep moving forward and even look to find your way out. I mean, back then you were on that mission. It's pretty amazing. So here we are at that point in the story. You're the youngest of 3, and the suitcases packed and you're ready to go, but there's nowhere. And you've got all this hurt and pain. And you talked about your sibling, your brother, a bit about your father. Take us from there. How did you dig out? What did you do? And what happened next that set your soul on fire?
Oh, boy. Well, by the time I was 14, I told my mom I needed help. I needed to go and talk to somebody. But the problem was, I did go and talk to somebody, but she was highly ineffectual. And the problem was that because of my dad's connection within the community, I would get sent to people that he knew that he could manipulate. So there was never any healing that really happened within those connections. So I didn't see that person, I don't think, more than just a few times. And then I ended up seeing another counselor who my dad was also seeing, who actually ended up doing more damage within the family because she bought into all the BS stories that he was telling. This is a personality disordered man we're talking about. So he had a way of manipulating. You know how narcissists are. They're charmers. They know how to wrap people around their fingers and make everything look like you're the crazy one. That's their word of choice, So it really wasn't, honestly, until I started having flashbacks at the age of 19, and I had an episode where I just lost it. And I was just sobbing on the floor and, banging on the tile in the bathroom and screaming. And my dad finally decided he'd had enough of me. So he decided he was going to take me to a psych hospital. And it was like some sort of punishment. He's like, I wash my hands of you. That's it. Let somebody else deal with you. And the funny thing is, he thought where he took me, they were a family of counselors and psychiatrists that were connected to the counselor that we saw beforehand. Now, this is the same woman who looked at me straight in the face at 17 and told me that I should be kinder to my father because he's a very sensitive man. And do you see what I mean about doing more harm than good?
I wrote about this. I wrote about this, Jade, and I want to jump in on that point. It's such a teaching moment, that what you said. I mean, I wrote about this point in my book in a different way. My father was a military commanding officer, and he was a violent man and an alcoholic, a drunk. And, I was raised by traditional values where, but it's your father, and it was the only father I had. And as a young child, you just don't know the difference. You talk about the word narcissist in the world of psychology, and I've done some work in this area, learning for myself that sometimes children like us, and certainly I can say, grow up as codependents, and there's this chain that we attach to the narcissist. Sometimes we can't break the chain because we're attached to that rush of what we think love is. That's why I honor you, and I love the story and your courage, is that you were able to break that chain and and look for a way out. And so when I look at the protectors in your family, the protectors from what you said seem to be, the sisters. Thank God you had some sisters around you. You talk about, physical abuse, emotional abuse, and it may go further than that. But something happened, you wrote about in your book, a tragic situation with your sister in 2015. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, I can. My sister and I had a really special bond. I want you to know this first. And we didn't even really establish that until I was 9 years old. But when we did, she became very fierce and very protective of me. And she stood up to my parents and she stood up to my brother. And I mean, she really advocated for me. Over the years, as we started to go our separate ways, she lived on the East Coast. I'm in the, obviously the Midwest. And then I had another sister on the West Coast. So, obviously we weren't, our kids didn't grow up together. So over the years, we grew up more apart. And it seemed the better I started to get emotionally and the more of the questions I had answered about our childhood, because there were a lot of gaps. Because it was so covert, there were a lot of things that didn't come to the surface immediately. And when they did, they came in as fragments. So they weren't full memories at first. But my sister and I worked really hard to put the pieces together. So as I started to get better in therapy, my sister started falling apart. And it was like when she reached the age of 50, she started becoming really, really anxious and really depressed. And she had a really hard time functioning in the regular world. And her life stressors and stuff just became more than she could handle. And this was a very strong and successful woman. This was not me. She didn't have my history of going from therapist to therapist to therapist. She'd had a few therapists, but, I was considered, actually, we were all put in this category in my family. We all took turns being sick. But Elizabeth was never considered sick until she was 50 years old. And all of a sudden, she just unraveled. And within 6 years, she took her life. And it was bad enough losing my oldest sister 18 years before. She died very tragically overnight. And that death was considered accidental. But it was very obvious that this death was a suicide. And it was a violent death, and it was very traumatic. And she was my last lifeline to my family because I'd cut ties, like 15 years ago. So she was the only one I communicated with. Yeah. And because of our bond, and our just because of the love between us, I was so crushed that I had no idea how to move forward because she was the one I looked up to. She was my surrogate mother. She was more than just a sister.
Yeah.
She was my hero.
Why don't you, let's pause you there and catch your breath again. And the first thing I want to say is we're so sorry for your loss. I mean, what a tragedy. When I read your book and I read the detail around, particularly the death of your first sister, and I know you said it was an accident. In your book, you wrote about it, how she was found in her car. And that in itself is tragic. To lose a second sibling, I can't even fathom. I can't even begin to put myself in your shoes. We're so honored with your courage. And I know that, and I'm telling you this from my heart, that every day you wake up, every moment of the day is painful and it's a journey. And I think that is why you telling your story is such a gift to others. There are people listening to my show that are saying right now, that's my story. And thank you for telling it, because I've been struggling with that. I want to also tell you, your sister was a hero. She paid the ultimate price for a purpose. And the thing about 50-year-old successful people, I can say this because I've spent my life teaching leaders to be better people, but I was a not healthy individual. I came from a traumatic background, and people looked at me on the outside as an executive and had nice things and said, wow, you're so successful. But I got to tell you, Jade, because I relate to that story, that on the inside, I like to say that there's many people out there like us that are on the outside looking strong, but we have these monsters inside. And I just want to finish the thought with this, that that the subconscious mind we have is our hard drive, and from when we're born, it wires together thoughts and emotions. And so somebody like your sister, somebody like me, somebody like you, our hard drive is filled with trauma, and the strongest ones in the family, the ones that are the protectors, they have the resilience to bury all that. Unfortunately, later in life, that can be triggered, and then all the pain is seen. And I went through that experience in my early 50s as well, where I hit the wall. I started seeing a psychologist, and I started wondering why my brain stopped and why all of a sudden I had all these difficult thoughts and feelings. So I understand that journey, and I'm just so sorry that you went through that experience with her. She sounds like a lovely person. Tell us from 2015, uh, as we move forward here, you turned your life into something amazing, I think, and that's doing life coaching and now sharing this story, the courage to do it, especially with the risks of what family might say. I mean, I honor that in what you're doing. Uh, and it's a necessary story, but tell us about how you've turned all this into your purpose. I want to just read something before you answer that. In your notes, it says her passions are postvention and teaching others how to create and sustain genuine and meaningful connections. In short, she helps women rebuild after traumatic loss. Tell us about your new purpose and how you move forward.
Wow. Well, after Elizabeth died, like I said, I was broken. But my major realization was, hey, if you don't start, I wanted to be in that space of denial, where maybe it wasn't as bad as we thought it was. But when she died, all of that ended. Like the denial that was it. I closed the door and I said, okay, now is the time to really accept it, accept who you are. If you don't start to love yourself, you're going to be next. I knew I could be another statistic, two down, one to go. And my oldest sister actually died. She wasn't found in her car. She went into respiratory failure. She was at home in her bed. So once I made that realization and I started really taking steps to love myself and honor myself, and I refused to derail me from my grief experience. So I started to, as I put it in my book, grieve like a superhero. I held nothing back.
I love it.
If I needed to scream and cry, like scream at my sister or scream at my parents or scream at God, I did it all. I held nothing back. And so that's what I teach other people to do. And so on top of joining my coalition and doing the Out of the Darkness walks and connecting with the AFSP, I also found life coaching and some life coaches to support me, and they helped me start writing again. And that's where the blogging came in. So I started blogging and writing all this poetry, and I wanted to have a place for it. So that's when No Parameters was created. And then when I got certified, I started reaching out to people and working with people locally to try to help them through loss and trauma. And now I'm on a mission to teach other people to love themselves and love each other better through loss, especially traumatic loss and especially suicide loss, because people are so afraid to approach us, as suicide loss survivors because of the stigma.
Yeah, totally. I totally understand that. I was writing down notes here in the word self-love. That's such a teaching moment that you've given us. And it's something that I realized was missing in my own life. And so I honor you for doing that. But to turn your blog, and I'm going to plug that, your website is No Parameters. I encourage the listeners to go there, check it out, read the blog, and connect and engage with you. In my journey, I've spent 10 years in mental health as a volunteer. I've lost family members, extended family members to suicide. And, having somebody to turn to, or someone who's taken that journey, who can help others find the path, is such a gift. And so I think your work is unlimited. And again, using your story to help people. I always say that when you tell your story, many of us can go into the journey with you. And I think that's what connects us to the heart. And, I learned a long time ago, Jade, that the path to wanting to change and do something different is to, connect emotionally or, have an impact in the soul. So you're certainly doing that with your work, which is awesome. Here you are now, and you're doing your life coaching and helping other people. I want to have some fun with you. If you were to take a piece of paper and write down the top 2 things that you do that light you up, that set your soul on fire, what's your joy?
Oh boy. Well, my joy is writing. I love to write. And I've recently been submitting a lot of articles to the Mighty. I'm still waiting for a couple of them to be published, but if people want to, look for me on the Mighty, they can find me there. I've been published in the Urban Howl and Elephant Journal and the Good Men Project. I just love to write because I feel like I can really focus and say what I want to say the way I want to say it. So that's probably the first thing. And the second thing is connecting with people. And my favorite thing is to see another person's eyes light up when they realize how great they really are. That is the best thing in the world to me when they see that.
Yeah. Well, I want to tell you this publicly over the show, that you need to know, and I know you're working on it, that you are greatness. You are love, and you were loved. And it's interesting because when you told your story, I've never said this publicly on the radio, and that in my family, there was a sibling who acted out their pain and experience from my father's behavior. And I took the brunt of that. And, I had resentment for a long time with that. And then my father died just over a year ago, and I was only able to find a way to accept his bad behavior when I found out his story. And so, by learning more about other people's pain, they say hurt people, and I'm not excusing the bad behavior. I don't excuse the bad behavior from my sibling. God teaches us to forgive, but not to accept the bad behavior. But it was when I went through that process in my own mind that it really set me free. I mean, all of a sudden my life changed, and I felt this incredible feeling of happiness I hadn't felt before. It was like a weight lifted off the shoulder. And that's what I see in the work you're doing with your blog and your story and what you're doing here. And, so many people can follow that and learn from you. So I'm going to mention the book again, and then we'll move to letting you have the last word to really tell us where we can connect to you and get that. The book in September 2018 was written, Wake Me from the Nightmare, Hope, Healing, and Encouragement After Suicide Loss. It was released on Amazon. It became a #1 bestseller, and then was picked up by a New York publisher. It's a gift. The paperback is coming out, I think, later this year. And so I want you to tell us now where we can get a hold of your body of work and where people can connect to you.
Well, you can find my book on Amazon, Wake Me from the Nightmare, Hope, Healing, and Empowerment After Suicide Loss. It's available there as an ebook. I will eventually be getting paperback books, hopefully soon. It's due for release in bookstores on November 12th. And you can find me at noparameters.org. You can also find me on Facebook at No Parameters and on Instagram at No Parameters. And what else can I tell you? You can find me at home a lot because I'm writing and hanging out with my kids.
Well, that's pretty cool. I think
you know where I live.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I think I might have said, I want everybody to know I read your book. I read it actually twice. I don't think I told you that. It was just so stunning and the perspective I got in it changed my life of thinking about this whole topic. And when I read that line, Midwestern version of The Girl Next Door, and I think I wrote this to you in my review that we put on Amazon, that, I want everybody to know that if you turn to your left, turn to your right at your neighbors, chances are there's somebody living in quiet desperation like Jade. And so that's why this story is important to take note of. Jade, I wrote down some words here on my paper. I do this as you're talking. They're not scripted. They're leadership words. You are a leader. You're a quiet warrior, but you're a leader. You're leading the way. You're a change agent trying to impact the world. The first word is enough. You are enough. The second is love. I mean, it comes out of you. I mean, I feel the smile on your face. People will see the show art we've designed for the show. Your picture, you're smiling. I mean, it's encouraging. Your courage, you're resilient to pick yourself up at age 5, keep moving forward after the losses and still dealing with your own trauma. It's amazing to me. And your hope. You know, if I look in the dictionary, the word hope, I see a picture of you. So thank you for being on the show. And I want to ask everybody to go to iTunes, find this show, give it a high rating so we can honor Jade's story. And Jade, thank you for leaving a legacy for those in the world to have hope and live with their joy. Will you come back again?
Oh, I would love to come back again.
All right. Well, thank you for being here. Everybody pick up that book and give it a rating as well. And find your purpose. Live with that passion like you hear Jade talk about. And live that life that you deserve and desire.
Thank you for listening to The Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca